So, well, I live there. Joakim Byström from Absolicon will be joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Thomas from Nasdaq, also partner in Naventus, will be joining us.
Thank you.
Then Camilla, you're back on stage again from the CEO of Kyoto. Oskar from Siemens Energy, leading the heat pumps marketing unit. And Osama Zaalouk from Alfa Laval. Let's see. Let's see if you can see it.
It works.
Okay. So I think I will, well, Camilla, you stole my thunder at the beginning of the session, I think, because you started talking about heat before the panel even started. But I think one challenge we all face, and in the Department of Energy Technology in KTH, and we are working with it, and I'm happy to actually work with all of you one way indirectly. It's that, as Camilla mentioned earlier, as we transition towards adoption of renewable energies, adopting solar and wind and so on, we realized the need for storage. And that's fine. I think industries have acknowledged now that, okay, we need storage and electrification is a path, etc. But then comes another problem that we came to realize recently, like Camilla mentioned earlier, which is that electrification or power as a final need is not actually where we, or as a society, consume the most. So as a society, if we want to transition, power is one of our needs, but we also need energy for transportation or energy for heat. And in fact, heat is half of their consumption, like Camilla mentioned earlier. This depends where in the globe, of course, but particularly in Europe, this is true. So with that said, of course, then it's obvious that when looking into heat, a big chunk of the emissions come from the industries because industries consume half of that heat demand. And at the same time, then that makes them responsible for the roughly then 25% or so of the of the emissions that we have. So this is a big opportunity or challenge, right? Because they come together. And all of you here are in the industry of tackling this challenge. And I think we'll take the opportunity in this panel to answer some of the questions or to create awareness for our community as to where are we and so on. Okay, so I'll get started building up on from Camilla also earlier. And what I said, yeah, so industries today primarily use fossil fuels, and some of them, though, okay, have adapted to using, well, biogas or electrified boilers, right? Direct electricity. Now, in the particular case of boilers, we've seen what happened last year with a rise in prices in electricity markets. And of course, that made it not even interesting also, right, or competitive. So, and these two are not the only technologies we can, industries can adopt, biogas or electrification with the typical electric boilers. So let's start with new technologies. So I'll start with you, Joakim, and I don't think it's, we know the sun as a major source of heat, but I don't think everyone is aware of some of the technologies that we can use to harvest that heat from the sun. So I'll start with you, Joakim, and explain what is a solar collector and what is Absolicon doing in that regards, and what's the niche that Absolicon can target.
But first, I'm super happy. This is the first time ever someone talks about heat. We feel very alone about this, and we made those buttons, heat is half, to make people understand that electricity only 20%, and transport is 30%, and heat is half. So I think this is a good start to actually solving the CO2 emission challenge. What we do are concentrated solar energy, that we focus the light into a narrow line, and then we can produce 160-degree hot steam that we run industries like breweries or textile industries with. And compared to using PV to make electricity that has about 20% efficiency, we have 76% efficiency. So when we start talking about heat, we can make much more efficient systems. And I also think that electrification will be an important part, but we don't have the grid to transfer all this electricity to the industries, and we don't have the renewable electricity production. So I think electricity will be one part of the transition of the heat that, as mentioned before today, just is made by burning fossil fuel. But solar thermal will also be one of the main solutions here.
Thank you, Joakim. And you mentioned electrification, I also mentioned electrification, and I omitted one part, which is, okay, direct boiler heating is not the only path to electrification. So I look at you, Oskar, because particularly in Sweden, Sweden is a country known for heat pumps, but I don't think the global community, the general audience, know what is a heat pump. So let's start there. And Siemens Energy is leading the path in heat pumps. What is your role or your take on heat pump technology in heat decarbonization, and which sectors are you primarily tackling?
So I'm, as Joakim, I'm very happy that people discuss about heat, because that's a huge consumption of fossil fuel. So what a heat pump does is that it utilizes what we normally see as waste heat. It can be like sewage water or river water, or also, of course, some waste heat stream from the industry. And the heat pump transfer a low-worthy energy to a high-worthy energy by adding some kind of energy, normally electricity. So, for example, here in Stockholm, you have 20% of the energy supplying to the district heating net is coming from heat pumps, and the heat source is the water you see outside of this building. So the heat pump utilizes 2 parts of the energy that is coming from a low-worthy heat source, and it's adding 1 part of electricity, and it gives out 3 parts of high-worthy energy that can be used for heating up our households or heating to the industry as well. So that is very, very good, I would say. And what we as Siemens Energy is trying to do is like the same journey that my company did in the 80s when Sweden wanted to get rid of the oil dependency we had. Now Europe would like to get rid of the fossil fuel dependency they have. So Sweden have already done this journey, and now we're trying to show our companies or investors in Europe what we have done in Sweden and how they can build this large-scale industrial heat pump that can deliver from one heat pump between 20 to 80 megawatt thermal output.
Excellent. So that's both industries and district heating. So as a sector, we're talking about already heat decarbonization, and we'll also hear about it before. And here comes, okay, Joakim talked about a technology that it's basically sun-dependent, because we need the sun in order to produce heat with the solar collector, right? And we talk about heat pumps, which actually need electricity then to make this happen, right?
Yep.
And then comes the question, well, we might not need the heat when the sun is there or when the electricity is cheap, right? So I look at you, Camilla, you already mentioned this earlier, so it's kind of like an opportunity to repeat it again, but what's Kyoto's take on energy storage, or thermal energy storage, should that matter, in this picture? How does it couple to these 2 technologies we mentioned earlier? And why should we store energy in the form of heat and not just, let's say, power to batteries and then heat?
So I would say that what we do is decouple the energy that is produced when the sun is there from when the industry needs it. So it's adding the flexibility to the, and we also call it load shifting. So we store fill our battery when there is electricity available, and we deliver when it's needed. So it's really about the flexibility and decoupling supply from demand. Yeah.
Good. And I'll repeat the question on the battery side, because I think that's tricky. And most of the audience usually refers to storage, batteries.
Yeah.
And then they might look at us and say, well, store power in batteries and then produce with the electric boiler. So why not doing that?
It's a fraction of the cost, so it becomes a cost question. I think roughly, maybe we are talking about 25% when you're storing the energy as heat compared to electricity. So it's a cost question, and it's also time. You will not be able to scale a lithium-ion battery to store that more than maybe 6-ish hours. But when you store it as heat, you can store it for days if needed.
Okay, so we're talking also about complementarity here, right? Joakim, you're going to say.
Yes, I think this high temperature storage is important, but it's also important to store like 90-degree hot water that you can use in district heating, and you can use it also as the fuel for heat pumps. And there, the storages are really cheap. The ones they have built in Denmark as pit storages, they are 800 times cheaper than batteries. So I think when politicians really understand that you can store energy 800 times cheaper than batteries, then this potential in the heat sector will flourish.
Fully agree. I hope our audience will do also, right? So it all sounds good. We're talking about, okay, heat is hot, acknowledging that technology is available, right? What are the challenges then? Why isn't it happening? So, and then I look at the other 2 faces here who haven't talked yet. So I look at Osama, because Osama works in Alfa Laval in the clean tech unit, and I understand one key problem when talking about all these technologies is the integration in the industry, right? Industries are very reluctant to, well, their process should not be affected when adopting these technologies. So for that, we need seamless integration, heat exchangers. So what do you think? What is your take and Alfa Laval's take in this ecosystem?
Yeah, good question. We talked about a lot of solutions. We know the problem. There is a heat demand, right? And then you need to couple those together. Heat exchanger is an obvious requirement. And in order to have that seamlessly integrated into the process, you need to have a heat exchanger that is compact so that you reduce the retrofittings that you need in your industrial facility. You need to have it as well designed, as reliable as possible to avoid any disruptions in your operations. And finally, and most importantly, that it has to be as efficient as possible. And efficiency here is both thermal efficiency and also the hydraulic performance. And that's essential not just for the process itself, but also within the solutions that we're talking about. Every bit of efficiency that you can increase in a heat exchanger, or like you can recover in a heat exchanger, this is an additional system overall efficiency that is quite important for the business case of the solution itself.
So you would say we have also the technology to integrate these technologies?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But the challenge here is a mental challenge. I was meeting with Alfa Laval distributors in the MENA region on an internal event, and Alfa Laval discussed about the efficiency of the heat exchangers, and then it was the coffee break, and everyone was talking about batteries and electric cars and PV, even though the whole day was about renewable heat. And if you ask a politician, how do you heat this building? They would say electricity. They don't know that it's district heating coming from burning waste at Värtaverken. So,
or heat pumps.
Or heat pumps,
pump.
yes. So we really need to get people to understand that the world is run on heat and steam, and then there's a small part of electricity for charging their phone and having some lights.
All is needed also, yeah. But then I look at Thomas. So Thomas is leading ESG at Nasdaq, correct? And when talking about challenges, clearly industries can look at us and hear all these nice things about adopting these technologies. What are the real drivers from the corporate perspective to adopt these technologies, and why aren't they doing it so fast then?
Well, first of all, I think it is quite optimistic. It is quite positive because you see the amount of resources going into this area, the whole sustainability, etc., in the financial system now is enormous. During the last years, it's been such a shift. So I think that's very positive. I think the drivers for the corporates are very much all the commitments that are done, the net zero commitments, etc., that they have to start to deliver on. So that's a very strong driver. We also see an extremely strong driver from the asset managers and the asset owner side that start to push. You have examples like the BlackRock, the Net Zero Alliance for the investors, etc. And that, of course, that will make a great push. I had a discussion last month with 2 or 3 banks, like US global banks, and they actually start to, they will need their big customers to start to decarbonize. Otherwise, they are not allowed to do business with them anymore. They can even start to subsidize some measures they take in order to get them onto this. So I think that is very positive. On the flip side, the challenges, I think a lot of fragmentation, rules are very cumbersome. It's a lot of fragmentation globally, etc. That is a large challenge. And then, of course, now we have increased cost of capital will be a challenge as well, even though the increased energy prices should be a good price signal to actually do more efficient energy management.
Thanks, Thomas. And I'll build up on your last comment there on increased cost of capital. We haven't talked actually about what it means. There are a lot of risk when an industry adopts these technologies, right? Technology-wise and so on. And there are also financial risks behind. So I look at maybe the technologies primarily, right? Like, what are the business models to make this happen faster? Is capital owning equipment the only way to go forward? Or can we reduce the risk on the industries? Camilla, Joakim.
So we have two clear, distinct business model, and we call it heat as a product and heat as a service. And heat as a product, we sell the battery, and that's typically the large companies who wants to control the energy asset. They want to have the asset on their side, and they control it. Then we sell the battery, and we provide service to the battery. But then you have the small and mid-sized family company, pulp and paper, corrugated cardboard plants. They have just bought their gas and produced their heat. And they have not had the relationship to the electricity market. And now they will need to do that, but they don't want to do that. Then we put our battery there, and we deliver heat as a service. We own the battery, we have it on our balance sheet, we have a financing partner to be able to have that on the balance sheet, and then we sell the megawatt hours of heat.
Perfect. Joakim, similar business model?
We do similar concepts. We call it heat as a service or heat power purchase agreements, heat purchase agreements. And for us, this has been a big door opener to the multinationals. Because if you come with the technology and you try to explain the solar collector and everything, they get confused. But if you say, we can give you heat at a lower price than what you pay today, then suddenly they get very interested. Because this is also about the cost of energy. Even if they have their commitments and they can have those nice speeches about CO2 reduction, when they take us aside after the speech, they say, oh, but you know, you still need to be cheaper than the gas.
Yeah.
And when you can give them a heat as a purchase agreement, which shows that they will have the heat from the sun cheaper than gas, then they're interested. Still, there's a lot of, you could imagine that if they get that offered, energy from the sun cheaper than gas, they would just sign it. No, it's still a long way to go for the multinationals before they do it.
Thank you. So we're running out of time, but I don't want to finish the panel without maybe leaving you the opportunity to say one last message as to create awareness to our, from my understanding, the ones who have to have this awareness. So, I don't know, institutional partners, right, policymakers. So what is needed then to accelerate this? And very briefly, each one of you before we finalize the panel.
I would say for the industries as well, like first of all, the first thing is waste heat recovery, optimize your process as much as you can, and then incentivizing energy efficiency when it comes to policymakers.
Okay, Camilla.
Policymakers need to see the heat picture and team up with the business to roll this out.
Joakim.
More panels like this one.
More panels like this. Thomas.
I think also policymakers, there's not one silver bullet. It has to be flexible and have the plethora of different solutions.
I'm more into Joakim's. People need to understand that heat is half. I think that's very important.
No, great. Well, I thank you all, and for me it's been a pleasure to talk about you and to spread the word. We at KTH work with you, so I'm happy and I hope we continue doing that and we can continue spreading the word in panels like this. So thank you all for listening today. Thank you.